Between 2022 and 2026, a quiet shift started happening across the United States. It didn't trend on social media, it didn't dominate headlines, and most people never noticed it. But when you start looking at the data, real estate transactions, IRS migration reports, and long-distance moving patterns, a very clear picture begins to form. A growing number of Americans aren't just moving randomly, they're relocating with a strategy. Not for better weather, not just for jobs, but for long-term financial stability, lower cost of living, and something most people rarely think about: control over their future. At first, I thought this was just another post-pandemic migration trend, people leaving big cities, chasing space, chasing affordability. But the deeper I looked, the more structured it became. This isn't random movement, this is calculated positioning. I spent weeks analyzing public data sources, county-level property trends, state tax structures, cost of living indexes, infrastructure reports, even insurance rate changes across different regions. And what stands out isn't just where people are going, it's how they're deciding. Because people from completely different backgrounds, remote workers, retirees, small business owners, freelancers, and even mid-career professionals are all following a similar decision-making framework. Different incomes, different lifestyles, same filters. And once you understand those filters, you start seeing the pattern everywhere. Most people think moving is an emotional decision, a better city, a bigger house, a safer neighborhood, but the data tells a different story. The most strategic movers are treating relocation like a long-term investment decision. They're asking questions most people don't ask. Not where do I want to live, but where does my money actually last? Where can I reduce fixed expenses over time? Where can I build stability instead of chasing it? And that shift in thinking changes everything. The first factor they focus on is cost efficiency, not just cheap housing, but total cost of living over time: housing, taxes, insurance, utilities, transportation, everything combined. States with no income tax, lower property taxes, and manageable insurance costs immediately stand out. Because over 10 or 20 years, small differences in expenses don't stay small, they compound. A person saving even $800 a month by relocating is effectively creating an additional income stream. Over a decade, that's nearly 6 figures in retained capital, and that doesn't include appreciation in property value or investment opportunities created by that extra cash flow. Then comes income flexibility, and this is where things really changed. Remote work didn't just give people convenience, it gave them geographic freedom. People earning salaries tied to high-cost cities are now living in lower-cost areas without reducing their income. That gap between earnings and expenses becomes pure financial leverage. And leverage is what separates survival from growth. It's what allows some people to save aggressively, invest consistently, and move ahead financially, while others stay stuck in high-expense cycles. Another major factor is infrastructure reliability, not luxury infrastructure, but dependable systems. Stable electricity, consistent internet, accessible healthcare, manageable traffic, and functioning public services. Because when you think long-term, reliability matters more than comfort. A city with occasional instability might feel fine short-term, but over years, those disruptions cost time, money, and opportunities. Then there's population density. This is one of the most overlooked factors, but it shows up clearly in the data. Highly dense urban centers often come with higher costs, more competition, and increased pressure on resources. On the other hand, extremely rural areas may lack opportunities, healthcare, and connectivity. So people are choosing a middle ground, areas where growth is happening but congestion hasn't taken over yet. Places where you still have access to opportunities, but without the constant financial pressure of a major city. Local economic growth is another strong signal. Smart movers aren't chasing cities that already peaked. They're identifying regions where growth is still building. Places where businesses are expanding, where infrastructure projects are being developed, where population is gradually increasing. Not explosive growth that drives prices too high too fast, but steady, sustainable development. Housing market behavior also plays a critical role. Instead of buying into already expensive markets, these buyers are targeting areas where property values are rising steadily but remain accessible. Because buying at the peak limits your upside. Buying before full growth happens creates opportunity. And this is where timing becomes everything. Then there's something even deeper: long-term livability. This includes environmental stability, access to essential services, community strength, and overall quality of life over decades, not just months. Because a place that feels good today might not function the same way 10 years from now. And the people making these moves are thinking in decades, not trends, not hype, time. When you combine all of these factors, a very clear pattern emerges. People are slowly moving away from high-cost, high-pressure urban centers and toward balanced regions where cost, opportunity, and lifestyle align. Not the cheapest places, not the most popular places, the most efficient places. Some are choosing smaller cities in states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, where tax advantages and economic growth create long-term financial benefits. Others are moving to developing suburban areas just outside major metro regions, places where housing is still relatively affordable, but access to jobs, healthcare, and infrastructure remains strong. And then there's a third group, the most strategic one. They're identifying what could be called emerging zones, areas that aren't widely discussed yet, but show strong indicators of future growth based on infrastructure development, migration patterns, and economic activity. These aren't obvious choices. That's exactly why they work. At first glance, all of this might look like a simple migration trend, but it's not. It's a shift in how people think about money, stability, and control. Instead of reacting to rising costs, they're repositioning themselves before those costs become unavoidable. Instead of adapting to pressure, they're avoiding it entirely. And history shows that this kind of behavior doesn't happen randomly. It happens when systems start changing, when affordability declines in certain areas, when opportunities shift to new regions, and when people who pay attention act earlier than everyone else. The people making these moves aren't louder, they're just earlier. And that timing advantage changes everything. Because moving after prices rise means you're following the trend. Moving before that happens means you benefit from it. That difference can impact your financial position, your lifestyle, and your opportunities for years, maybe even decades. The most important takeaway here isn't a specific state or city, it's the mindset behind the decision. The people making these moves aren't guessing, they're analyzing, comparing data, understanding long-term trends, and making calculated decisions based on efficiency and sustainability. And once you start thinking this way, you begin to see your own situation differently. Your expenses start to look different. Your location starts to feel different. Your options become clearer. Because right now, across the country, people with the same income, the same opportunities, and the same access to information are quietly making decisions that will shape the next 10 to 20 years of their lives. No announcements, no attention, just strategy. And maybe the real question isn't where people are moving. Maybe the real question is, are you thinking about your future the same way they are?